We still had record numbers of money spent, people served, success stories. We buried more people this year than any year I can remember. More suicides this year.
Yeah.
These folks are exhausted. God didn't place them where he did at the time we showed up. Would most likely have been either died on the streets or been killed on the streets. She got the Narcan and she Narcaned him and brought him back. And instead of talking about him being dead, the following Tuesday, he was there getting services and thanking her for another chance at life.
We have a guest in Orange County. He's kind of mean. Just recently, I said, "Are you ever going to let me touch your arm?" And he said, "You could even hug me," because he sees me hugging the other guests. And for him to say that to me meant a lot.
Shannon, who had graduated from our program and then worked her way up through as an employee, became our director over in Orange County. She's a heroin addict. She wasn't just, I was a drug addict. This girl was a heroin addict. You know, it sounds a little cliche, but it really was like watching this beautiful butterfly all of a sudden appear. You kind of go like, wow, nothing better than see that light go back on in somebody's life.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy Lewis with We Are Winter Garden, and we are joined today with Scott Ballou, who is the CEO and founder of Matthews Hope, as well as Shelley Bradford, who is the president and executive directors of Matthews Hope. Welcome to episode 61 of Straight Talk No BS with Matthews Hope, presented by Imagine Marketing. We're going to be talking...
That was fantastic. Just for you that are listening, we were betting that she wasn't going to get that right. We'll explain the change later.
And I did. So we're going to be looking...
Wow, I'm so proud.
We're going to be taking a look back at the past year.
It's like when my child took its first walk. Sorry. Oh, look, she took her first steps.
I think we need to redo this.
No, absolutely not.
Are we ready?
We're ready.
We're ready.
We've been ready.
Awesome. So we're going to be taking a look back at the past year through the lens of Matthews Hope and the guests that you guys all serve. Before we look back, a lot of people, they are surprised when they hear that Matthews Hope closes its doors during Christmas. Can you guys explain why you do that?
Yeah, because this time of year, everybody wants to serve the homeless. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to come out. Everybody wants to give to the homeless. They want to give to the less fortunate. They want to give to all the kids. Mainly, they want to come out and serve homeless because their kids are home from school. Mm. And so it's almost like they want to come in and teach their kids. I mean, I was guilty of it too. Before I worked for Matthews Hope, I was guilty of it as well. I wanted to, go to the car line, take the food box and let my kids see, look how blessed you are. Right. So many people want to do that this time of year, and the homeless get so much this time of year.
Gotcha.
To where the other 50 really weeks of the year, they don't get served.
Gotcha.
As much.
Yeah. And, we're coming up on our 15th year anniversary. And I made this decision years ago when I saw there are some really good organizations that do things during Christmas. Mm-hmm. That's when they do their thing. Mm-hmm. But it's also very common, as Shelley said, that people want to get out there. And the intent is good. And listen, my kids are better people for the fact that they served the homeless when they were younger. But we really got them out there serving. It wasn't what happens sometimes. It becomes an observation. I want my children to see this. It's like, no, let's change that thinking a little bit, change the narrative. Let our children experience serving others.
Right.
And I think that, sometimes it makes, there's people that say, well, you shouldn't even take pictures of homeless people when they're, when you're taking care of them. And, we never shove a camera in anybody's face. However, the other side of it is if nobody knew about us,
right.
We would have already been gone. So there's so much that comes into play this time of year. But the truth is that, our folks put in probably in each of them an average of 50 hours a week, the other 50 to 51 weeks a year. And this is time for them to be with their families, knowing full well that these folks are going to be cared for.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. So let's give people an overview of the last 12 months for Matthews Hope. Thinking about number of people served, the expansion, all of the stuff that has been happening in the last 12 months.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to think about. It's even when I was looking at the outline to how we're going to address things today. There were so many ups and downs, which has been true for again 15 years. But it was an interesting up and down. I mean, I'm very proud of our staff and our volunteers, and very thankful for them and the donors that have hung with us. Because there's been points where we have averaged 1,000 touches in 1 week.
Wow.
Between our two locations. And that number is just shy of that, has stayed pretty steady. That was even after, because of, we've been covering about $500,000 in debt since the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so we've had to make some cutbacks on things. And even with that, we still had record numbers of money spent, people served, success stories. We buried more people this year than any year I can remember. More suicides this year.
Yeah.
Why do you
More
think
tragic.
that is?
More tragic losses.
Yeah.
I think part of it is these folks are exhausted. They're just, if you come, the thing I see differently when I visit both our campuses is a tiredness and an anxiety level I haven't seen before. And I saw a lot of that with the new change in the laws that are coming up.
And there's so many unknowns with that law. Still,
that's the
even
thing,
for us, there's still so many
it's
unknowns.
being interpreted differently by pretty much every municipality. Some have taken a very hard stance on it, and so we've seen some pretty tragic outcomes because of that. And I'm not saying that we have the answer, but I was sharing with Charlene the other night. We were talking a little bit about some of the things that have happened, and I said, we're not going to get caught up in everything else. We're going to do what we do, and we're going to do it better than anybody else.
Right.
And that's what we can do. We can't get focused on when people take a shot at us, which is often for various reasons. But we're going to rejoice, and we're going to celebrate the victories that we see.
Mm-hmm.
And how about employees and volunteers? How has that been the last year?
Yeah. I'll start with the fact that, Shelley was named president back in April. Shannon, who had graduated from our program and then worked her way up through as an employee, became our director over in Orange County. Charlene got more involved again. We saw some people go, but I will say that for the most part, I was just saying to Shelley the other day, I said, I feel better where we're at right now than I have in a long time. We got some really spectacular
Your
staff.
foundation seems really good.
And-
And
and
so
we knew this
involved,
time
and your
was-
passion is
yeah.
just so there.
We knew this time was coming too, but just getting through to it, man, it was tough.
I mean, don't get us wrong. We have things to still work out.
Always.
We were in a very intense conversation just last night on little things, but little things, if you don't address them, they can turn into big things. And the one thing that I have always loved about Shelley and respect her for is she's not afraid to disagree with me. And we're able to go back and forth. And sometimes it can be a little heated, but not as heated as anything else I've had with anybody else. But it's different when we
You'll
get
have a
strong
level
with
of
each
respect.
other. Yeah,
for each other.
and a lot of times we find out that we're both going the same place.
Right.
It's how we get there, and I think that's positive. I'll also say from a volunteer standpoint, we've had some volunteers now, like Carol,
Yeah.
has been with us since day one.
Cecilia has been with us for so long.
My God, Pam,
Yeah.
Pam is just a. I wish I knew how to love like her. I wish I knew how to enjoy life the way she does.
She does.
She's just.
She does.
What a
She's
joy to
a
be around.
spitfire. Yeah. So, and then we saw some sad things. We've talked in the past the loss of Calvin.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the loss of other guests. I think the hardest part is, I know for Charlene this year, she, on more than one occasion, I think it was 3 occasions, where she literally rode up on the someone that had just OD'd. But also was responsible for someone who had OD'd, and she knew what to do. She got the Narcan, and she Narcaned him and brought him back, and instead of talking about him being dead, The following Tuesday, he was there getting services and
That's
thanking
great.
her for another chance at life.
That's great.
Will that change who he is? We don't know yet.
Mm-hmm.
But what we do know is that he's been given one more chance.
Right. That's great.
And so it took, we spent a lot of time this year training people. We had our staff all trained.
That was the next thing I was
Yeah.
going to say. That was all about the training, because if we weren't able to train our staff the proper way to administer Narcan, the proper way to approach these individuals, because it's not like approaching you and me. That there is a lot of trauma that you don't know you're talking to.
Sure.
And if we hadn't had that training, how many people would we make mad?
Absolutely.
And we had people trained on AEDs. We had people trained on CPR.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when people want to see what's different about us, there's a lot of people that are doing the wrong thing for the right reasons. There's a lot of people that are doing good things. I will tell you that, we are heavily insured, and we spend a significant amount of time and money in making sure that our people are trained appropriately to go into a camp, to ride up on a stranger on a bicycle.
Very important.
It takes more than a good heart. I tell people all the time, and you've heard me say it probably since we met, don't let your heart get ahead of your head. God gave you a brain to reason and to think and to make sure you stay safe. And most of these people are harmless until they're not.
Sure.
Right.
And it's a handful. But when you have a trained eye and you have a relationship with people around those individuals, one, I can tell you, our folks are probably the most protected people on the streets because someone sees one of our people being harassed. God forbid street justice shows up, because it will. They're going to step themselves in the middle between whoever is trying to create harm or aggravation. They will automatically, male or female, will step in the middle. And that says a lot for the relationships that we have.
You guys have definitely created that sense of family. So what is the most memorable interaction that you guys have had in regards to Matthew's Hope in the last year? Whether it be with a guest, a coworker, volunteer, maybe the government?
We have a guest in Orange County that is, we met him during the hurricane, right? Yeah, the hurricane. And he comes in with a very loud, with his phone on very loud. And you can talk to him and ask him to turn it down, and he'll turn it down and then turn it back up and look at you. He's kind of mean. And he is one of the few guests that will not let you touch him. And just recently I said, "Are you ever going to let me touch your arm?" And he said, "I trust you now to where you can touch my arm." And he said, "You could even hug me," because he sees me hugging the other guests.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, wow. Because listen, he was very plain. He looked at me. He said, "I don't know you. Do not touch me again." And when he said that, I was like, well, okay then. Because I've never had anybody react to me like that before. And it was really just like, "Please turn your phone down." And he just about came out of his skin. And for him to say that to me meant a lot.
Right.
Because that was weeks and a couple of months of him just being in my presence, seeing I feel silly saying how I care, but I do care, or I wouldn't be here. So that was probably a moment that I probably haven't shared with anybody, because it was one of those shocking moments in my life where I was like, oh, wow.
How special.
I actually expected him to go, "I already told you."
Right.
Because he's that matter of fact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, and like you mentioned earlier, they have so much trauma.
Yeah.
So we don't know what they've been through.
Yeah.
And it's weirdly common, more common than people think, especially in mobile. I mean, obviously, when I talk about my most memorable, one of them was obviously naming Shelley president and then seeing Shannon rise to where she's at. But one of the coolest things that have happened recently, and I wasn't there, but I got the phone call immediately after it happened. And Charlene, was leading up the mobile teams that day, and she's out. And there's a gal that anybody living in the Cocoa area will see. She's a former teacher, a little black woman, and I won't say her name right now, but you'll see her travel up and down 520 with about 4 grocery carts full of whatever. And nobody talks to her because she's very belligerent and very ugly. And
I want to remind everybody, you said she was a teacher.
she had been a teacher. Yeah. And she clearly is mentally ill. Her family lives around here. They're aware of where things are at. But what was very interesting is that the joke has been at some time, Charlene doesn't give up. Okay. And so she rides up on her and says, this is just a few weeks ago, something like, "Hey, darling, can you use anything today?" And she looked at Charlene and she says, "I am not your blankety blank darling, and I don't want your blanking freaking peanut butter and jelly sandwich," right? And it's like, okay, and have a good day, and it ends there. The following week, maybe a week or two passed, and Charlene saw her again, pulled over. By the time it was finished, Charlene was holding her hand and talking with her.
Wow.
And she says, "Is there anything that I could do for you that we wouldn't normally?" And she goes, "I would really like a watch." And she goes, "Something with a larger face." And she goes, "I want to make sure it has numbers on it. I don't want digital." Okay, it was very, and Charlene says, this, all of a sudden she went from here. And she said, "But feminine." And so we found something online, and we actually had someone notice that I posted that we're looking for this watch. And people from the community came out and said, offered some used watches to choose from, whatever. And someone else found the exact picture of the watch that we had found and ordered and had it sent to her. And Charlene was able to take that out to her. And she said, again, Charlene's holding her hand and calling her by name. And they're having this conversation. She goes, "Oh, darling, you didn't have to do that." She goes, "Why don't you take it? Oh. That would look really nice on your arm."
Oh my gosh.
And she said, "Miss So-and-so, I can't do that. This was specific you." And she went something like, kind of put her hand on her heart. She goes, "That is so kind." Yeah. And Charlene had noticed she looked like she'd been beaten up. Mm-hmm. And so she talked to her about that. And she wouldn't say who did it, but somebody had attacked her. Now, this woman is probably in her 70s, maybe older. I don't know.
She might weigh 100 pounds.
Oh, God, yeah, But so what was interesting is that David, who was out with her, took a picture of Charlene and her embracing. Mm-hmm. And Charlene sent it to one of the local police officers that we know pretty well that have served in this community about 8 years. And he goes, "There's no way that happened." He goes, "She has not allowed anybody to even talk to her for as long as I can remember. And I have been on the force for 8 years."
Mom.
So, and Charlene, of course, if you know Charlene, she's brought to tears, and then the craziest thing was that as I got ready to let David, who's turning 80, so he's actually retiring. He said, "It's time to quit driving." But he put his hand on her shoulder, and she smiled at him. And so we had a couple things going there. This was a Black woman who had problems in the past talking about white people, but in general didn't like anybody. And now she's got these two people, and they're having conversation, and there's a gentleness, and there's this thing where I say is, when was the last time that person had some type of human touch? Now, she may tell her to go blank herself next time she sees her. Who knows? Mm-hmm. But Charlene not giving up. And this is true with a lot of our people over the years, not giving up. When they always say, "You saw us, you came back." That's always one of my favorite, "You came back." Yeah. That's when the relationship starts. That's when he gave you permission. Okay, you can now, I trust you enough now. Okay, that's a big deal. And you have to wonder what abuse these people have experienced. Yeah. To, one, feel that way. Two, react sometimes violently when someone approaches them. Mm-hmm. There's more to the story than what meets the eye.
Yeah, right. For sure. Those are beautiful moments that you guys will probably cherish forever. And it's going to snowball effect into other guests, I feel. What is the most challenging, or one of the most challenging moments or situations that you guys had to deal with this past year?
Gosh, for me, it was Calvin. It was losing Calvin and figuring out what that balance was as Matthew's Hope, and we don't do funerals, but he was so special to us. And what is the right thing to do to honor him, because he was so special to us. And that was probably one of the hardest decisions to come to on how to navigate that for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Calvin's death.
I'm still getting text messages about him.
Yeah.
People still just finding out that he just passed.
It just was one of those things that it didn't make sense. You couldn't make sense of it. It happened so fast. You go from, hey, I'm feeling this to, he's done. But like I'll remind people, the success story in all of it is he did not die alone on the streets. He was surrounded by staff that had become loving friends and family of his. I think the other is there's a couple other like Michelle and some others that we're pretty sure were murdered because it didn't make sense how they OD'd, knowing that those would never be investigated properly, and knowing that the people that we believe are involved and have been involved with a number of people that have died in the last several months continue to be on the streets and nothing's being done. And then, of course, I will say this has been our most challenging financial year.
For sure.
Just because of the sheer growth and need. It's not so much the cost of the property itself and the growth of Brevard, that was covered. It was coming into how do you deal with adding thousands of people into your care. And I compare it to, I've said this before, is you left home in the morning and you had 3 kids when you left.
Yeah.
And you came back to the same house that night and there was 10, but you had the same salary and you had the same space to work with and what have you. And that was challenging but that's also a testament to our staff and volunteers is nobody panicked. We just stopped and said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We've been understaffed the whole year. We have been under from lack of volunteers. That's happened during the pandemic. We lost about 90% of our volunteers to the pandemic, and a lot of them just old enough didn't come back from that. And so but that has been getting better. More volunteers are starting to show up. Donations are getting better. We're through tail end of a $1 million grant, matching grant right now that we're approaching halfway there. Okay. With just a little bit of time left, just a little time left.
Holding our breath.
But who knows what God will do with that? But I mean, that has been, I think, for us. That, and of course, we went through, finished our yearly audit.
Yeah.
And of course, that people don't realize that's very expensive and it's very time consuming, and it's something that there's 2 sides of the story. It's expensive, it's time consuming, it's aggravating. At the same time, it gives the general public and it gives our donors the confidence in knowing that we have an independent audit every year, and every penny has to be accounted for, where it came from and where it went. And as aggravating as that is, to try to do all that, and when you've got a budget that has become large as ours, and you're nearing 50 employees, and you have 2 locations, and you have 2 medical offices, and 2 schools, and 2 laundry, you just keep double everything. It was mentally very challenging from that standpoint too, though. Yeah. But again, a testament to the leadership of Shelley and her team, and watching how our volunteers have really done more with less.
What you guys are doing and have done is pretty spectacular and pretty inspiring. So I hope the community is starting to recognize that if they haven't already. So that's pretty great. What's something that you're most proud of that's happened this last year with Matthew's Hope?
Well, mine definitely was Shannon. I mean, we've already talked about her, but mine, seeing her excitement when she actually, because she knew she was up against 2 other very strong candidates. And I'm sure she had decided in her mind that it wasn't going to be her. So to see her excitement, that was really cool. And I rarely cry, but I remember crying that night.
And Shannon used to be a guest
And
of
Shannon
yours.
used to be a guest, right?
And she used to be on drugs. So
Yeah.
I just want to also again remind people that these are just
She's a heroin
beings
addict. She wasn't just, I mean, I was
fell.
a drug addict. This girl was a heroin addict.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe
you
you
guys
look like a
didn't give up on
cokehead,
her.
like I was just playing with toys, I mean,
Sure.
it was a serious addiction. It cost her everything.
Yeah.
Her health, it cost her children. And for her to not just come back from that, but then to blossom. I mean, it sounds a little cliche, but it really was like watching this beautiful butterfly all of a sudden appear. You kind of go like, wow.
And her leadership qualities are amazing. And I look at her sometimes and know where she's come from and wonder, where did you learn that?
Wow.
Because her leadership qualities just really are amazing.
And how did you get there and how to get back? Now, like 99% of people deal with, there was trauma involved.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing the general public doesn't get. And I say that, and it may sound unfair to people, but when I watch the things that are said on social media about homeless people, it's clearly the level of ignorance that is out there.
Lots of ignorance.
But part of it is because they've been sold this.
Right.
They've been sold this. And the truth is homelessness doesn't look anything like probably 99 out of 100 people believe it does.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you see someone like Shannon, it can be done. But the cool thing is I can also tell you that we have Donnie, another great story.
It's about to be a really good story.
It's about to get a really crazy good story.
Can we get an update on him? Or is it coming?
We can.
Can we say it now? Yeah.
We can?
Well,
yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can. We can. We just made him an employee.
Wow.
So
congratulations, Danny.
Which a lot of people would go, okay, how crazy is this? The guy was mentally ill.
Lord have mercy. I would have never seen it.
When I first got the call from Charlene and I were heading to some kind of community meeting of some kind, and I've got Shelley and Shannon on the phone, and they're saying, and we toyed with some ideas, but they said, we think it's time. And I'm like going, really? But then we stopped for a minute, and they remind me to stop for a minute. Look what he's been doing for us already.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I think that that maybe in his case, the theater closing down is maybe one of the things that was best for him. And Donnie's still going to be able to go out. If the theater were to reopen or something, he could be there as a volunteer, or if they wanted to hire him again, whatever. But there's again, you sit there and you take a guy who, if God didn't place him where he did at the time we showed up, would most likely have been either died on the streets or been killed on the streets. Yeah. Because he was one of those people that people were going to take advantage of and hurt
vulnerable.
him. Very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And he's like, so, and then we had another cool thing that just happened. We just recently, you all have heard us talk about, those who have listened before have probably heard us talk about Rick.
So before we talk about Rick for a second, I just got
excited.
No, this is great. I want to let everybody know if they haven't seen our episode with Donnie. It's in episode 49. So go back to episode 49 and listen
Maybe we
to Donnie's
story. You think we can link to it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
But some way we put that in there. But yeah, but it's easy to find. I will tell you, it's worth watching. It's interesting to hear him talk about coming out of the fog. Absolutely. Okay, because again, we can think we know what we saw, but he's seeing it from the other side of the eyes.
Right.
So that's very cool. And then we got Rick, who, if you haven't, I encourage you to look in past issues of our Moving Forward magazine. But Rick came in this with this massive burly beard and long hair and a hat, and that was his force field to keep you away. Yeah. Didn't barely speak. We learned his story, what have you. But Rick has been in the program, and he just recently, the next step towards graduation is to receive your purple shirt and what's called a graduate assistant. Okay. And you get more responsibilities, and you get a little more freedom. And it's kind of like we're weaning you off now. And what's interesting also, but Rick is 63, had never, since he was 6 years old, had glasses. And when I tell you the man was blind, I'm telling you that he would have to look at something this close and right up against his face and then kind of see if he could find an angle.
Sure.
And Rick was able to get LASIK and cataract surgery, and he can see everything now.
Wow.
Now, the downside of that is he works around the grounds a lot, and now Rick sees everything. So I get a list on
That's
a regular
good for you,
basis. Yeah, it's good. It's good and it's bad because, we have a lot of property and it's a lot to take care of. And so now, but we got Rick out there, and I would not be surprised if Rick ends up being someone who ends up going to work for us. He's just really a fabulous individual. He's liked by everyone. But when people remember him when they first met him or saw him, they go, "There's no way that's the same guy." We saw a picture the other day, and I didn't realize how once that beard came off, how drawn his face was. Yeah. He's definitely filled out. I'm not fat. I mean, he's just filled out.
He's healthy.
But we've helped him get his Social Security. We're working on his VA benefits right now. There's so much that is coming together that he is participating in his own recovery, which is so big because we're always saying, help us, help them, help themselves. He is in full bore.
I love that. Yeah. So is there anything else that you guys want to add before we put a bow on 2024?
Probably.
I think now that will fit into our episode. I think we'd be sitting here all day.
Yes, we will.
But I think that for me personally, it was good because it's hard to get. It's hard when you get caught up in the naysayers and the untruths and laws that are being in place that clearly are not meant to help anybody. That we see the victories and we see the joy in people, and there's nothing better. If you ever get a chance, there's nothing better than to see that light go back on in somebody's life. And we are privileged to be able to do that on a regular basis.
Well, thank you guys.
So we invite people too. If you're not a donor, donate to us. Something else I want to do before we close, because I know we're running up on the end of the year, is that the grant that we have, it's also the matching grant is also being matching monthly giving. So if you become a sustaining donor, and let's say you donate $100 a month, that's actually going to come to the form of $2,400 for Matthew's Hope.
Great.
So, and sustaining donors is something we really need because most of your giving happens in the fall and early spring. And then you got to figure out how to make it the rest of the year. So when we have sustaining donors, it's less challenge for a giver to do because they're giving less at one time and they kind of spread it over for the year, but it also eases up for us too. And when you're trying to manage $15 million of stuff and people and that's a real help.
Well, it's consistency, and you guys can know that it's going to be there.
Right.
So that's helpful. Well, thank you guys for sharing the challenges, because out of those challenges come a lot of beauty, and you guys are really helping a lot of people with the help of the community. So thank you guys for watching and listening. Please please share this podcast on social media. Let your neighbors know, your friends know, your kids know. And we hope you have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, and we'll see you next year.